The medical bay lights flickered as Dr. Hana finished cataloging the morning's supply inventory. Dawn Station was quiet today, which meant she could actually catch up on paperwork. She smiled at the thought. 3 years working on the edge of known space, and she still found joy in boring administrative tasks. It meant nobody was dying. The alarm shattered that peace. Red lights flooded the corridors. Hana's tablet lit up with emergency codes she had hoped never to see. Her fingers moved automatically, pulling up the station's external cameras. Her breath caught in her throat. A Krillian warship hung in space outside the station, its hull torn open in 3 places. Atmosphere vented from the wounds like blood from a dying animal. The ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of Dawn Station, but it looked fragile now, broken. Commander Minho's voice crackled through her earpiece. Medical bay, prepare for incoming. We have wounded. How many? Hana asked, already moving toward the emergency supplies. 1 adult Krillian. Critical condition. Hana's hands froze over the medical kit. Krillians were predators. Everyone in the galaxy knew that. They were 3 meters tall with scales like armor and claws that could tear through steel. Their empire had conquered 40 systems before humanity even reached the stars. They didn't ask for help. They took what they wanted. Hana, did you copy? Minho's voice was sharp. Copied. Bay is ready. She forced her hands to keep moving. Whatever her fears, she was a doctor first. The bay doors opened with a hiss. Security Chief Taijin entered first, his weapon raised but not aimed. Smart. Behind him. 4 security officers struggled to support something huge. Vector was dying. Hana knew it the moment she saw him. The Krillian warrior's scales were scorched black in places, and one of his 4 arms hung useless at his side. His breathing made a wet, rattling sound that spoke of punctured lungs. But it was his eyes that told the real story. They were dimming, losing the fierce yellow glow that all Krillians carried. Table 3, Hana said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Carefully. Support his spine. As they moved Vector onto the examination table, Hana saw the bundle in his remaining good arm. It was wrapped in torn fabric that might have once been a military uniform. Something inside the bundle moved. Commander, what is that? Hana asked. Vector's eyes snapped to her face. Recognition flickered there. His mouth opened and words came out in broken standard language. Human doctor, you remember Vector? Hana did remember. 2 years ago, during the first contact negotiations, Vector had been part of the Krillian diplomatic guard. There had been an incident. A misunderstanding. Vector had thought a human ambassador was threatening his commander. He had attacked, and Hana had been caught in the middle. His teeth had sunk into her forearm before. Anyone could stop him. She still had the scars, but she also remembered what happened next. When Vector realized his mistake, he had done something no Krillian had ever done before. He apologized? In his language, in standard, in every way he knew how. The negotiations had nearly failed, but Hana had insisted the incident was forgotten. Accidents happened. Fear made people do things they regretted. I remember you, Vector, Hana said softly. She moved closer, ignoring the way Taijin's hand tightened on his weapon. Let me help you. The bundle in Vector's arm moved again. A sound came from it. A small, frightened chirp. My son, Vector said. His massive hand carefully pulled back the fabric. My Jinho. Hana's medical training fought with her instincts as she looked at the youngling. He was small, maybe half a meter long, with scales that still held the soft blue tint of childhood. His eyes were too large for his face, and his claws were barely developed. He looked like a baby. He looked helpless. He also looked terrified. Vector, I need to examine you, Hana said. Your injuries are severe. She reached for the diagnostic scanner on her belt. The movement was slow, careful, but to the youngling it must have looked like an attack. Jinho exploded from his father's arms in a blur of blue scales and sharp teeth. Pain shot through Hana's hand. The youngling's jaws locked around her palm with surprising strength. She felt his teeth pierce skin, felt the immediate numbness that came with Krillian venom. Her medical training screamed at her. Kryllian younglings were venomous. Their bites could paralyze a full-grown Terran bull. Tyjan's weapon was up and aimed. The other security officers moved forward. Someone was shouting, but Hana was looking at Vector. The dying warrior's eyes were wide with horror and sadness. His good arm reached out toward his son, but he was too weak to move. In that moment, Hana understood. Vector knew he was dying. He knew his son was alone and scared. He knew that Jinho's attack might get him killed by the humans. Hana did the only thing she could think of. She smiled. The pain was incredible. Her hand was already going numb, and she could feel her fingers losing sensation. But she smiled and looked down at the frightened youngling hanging from her hand. "You bite like your father," she said gently. The words were in standard, but Vector understood. A sound came from him that made every human in the room freeze. It was a laugh. Rough, wet, and fading, but a laugh nonetheless. "Human friend," Vector whispered. His good hand reached out, and without thinking, Hana took it. His scales were rough and cold under her uninjured hand. "Promise." "Promise, Vector." "What?" Hana asked. The venom was spreading up her arm now. She was going to pass out soon. "Protect my Jinho, raise him. Teach him. Teach him humans are friends." Vector's eyes were barely glowing now. "Promise?" Hana wanted to say no. She wanted to say this was impossible. She was a doctor, not a parent. She knew nothing about raising a Kryllian child. The political complications alone were unthinkable, but Jinho was still attached to her hand, and she could feel him trembling. "I promise," Hana said. Vector's hand squeezed hers once. Then the light went out of his eyes completely. The medical bay was silent except for the machines that now showed flat lines. Jinho finally released Hana's hand and made a sound that transcended species. It was the sound of a child who knew his father was gone. Hana caught the youngling as he fell. Her vision was blurring from the venom, but she held him close. Jinho struggled for a moment, then collapsed against her chest, making that heartbroken sound over and over. "Medical emergency," she heard Tyjan say into his cum. "Dr. Hana has been envenomated. Need backup immediately. What about the Kryllian youngling?" Someone asked. Tyjan looked at Hana, then at the small creature in her arms. "I think that decision just got made for us." As consciousness faded, Hana felt Jinho's small claws grip her medical coat. He was holding on to her like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing universe. Maybe she was. 3 weeks had passed since Vector died, and Hana was starting to understand why most species avoided adopting children from other worlds. Jinho had destroyed her quarters for the 3rd time this week. The furniture lay in pieces across the floor. Claw marks covered the walls. Her personal tablet was bent in half, which should have been physically impossible for something his size to accomplish. The youngling sat in the corner, neck ridges raised high in a threat display. His scales had darkened from soft blue to an angry purple. When anyone except Hana approached, he hissed and showed his teeth. "This can't continue," Commander Minho said from the doorway. He was careful not to step inside. Last week, Jinho had launched himself at anyone who crossed the threshold. The station crew is getting nervous. Yesterday, he nearly bit Lieutenant Seok when she brought food. Hana looked at her commanding officer and tried to find the right words. Her hand still bore the scars from that first bite. The venom had left permanent nerve damage. Her fingers sometimes didn't respond the way they should. But when she looked at Jinho, she didn't see a monster. She saw a terrified child who had watched his father die. "Give me more time," Hana said. "The Kryllian High Command is sending a delegation next month. They want answers about why we're keeping one of their younglings." Minho's expression softened slightly. "I understand what you're trying to do, Hana, but this might be bigger than us. This could start a diplomatic incident. Or worse." After Minho left, Hana sat down on the floor, ignoring the debris. She was exhausted. Between her regular medical duties and caring for Jinho, she was getting maybe 4 hours of sleep a night. The youngling refused to eat the synthetic Kryllian food they had ordered. He wouldn't let anyone else near him. He spent his nights making small, sad chirping sounds that broke her heart. She must have dozed off because she woke to find Jinho standing over her. His neck ridges were down and his scales had returned to their normal blue. He tilted his head, studying her face. "Hey," Hannah said softly. She didn't move. Any sudden gesture might set him off again. Jinho made a questioning sound. His small clawed hand reached out and touched her face, surprisingly gentle. The door chimed. Before Hannah could respond, it opened and a woman she didn't recognize walked in. The stranger was young, maybe 30, with sharp eyes that took in everything at once. She wore civilian clothes, which was unusual on a military station. Jinho reacted instantly. His ridges shot up, and he positioned himself between Hana and the newcomer. The hiss that came from him was much more aggressive than usual. "Fascinating," the woman said. Protective behavior toward his chosen guardian. Textbook Krillian attachment response. "Who are you?" Hannah asked, slowly getting to her feet. "Dr. Haijin, cultural anthropologist. Minho asked me to come observe." The woman crouched down, making herself smaller. "Hello, Jinho. I'm not here to hurt anyone." Jinho didn't relax, but he didn't attack either. Haijin spent the next hour observing without speaking. She watched how Jinho moved, how he reacted to different stimuli, how he constantly checked Hannah's position. Finally, she asked Hannah to join her in the corridor. "He's not adapting because he's not being allowed to act like a Krillian," Haijin said. "You're treating him like a human child? That's why he's frustrated." Hannah felt defensive. "I'm trying my best. I don't know anything about raising a Krillian." "I know. And that's actually good. You're showing compassion, which is important. But Krillian younglings have specific needs tied to their biology." Haijin pulled up a holographic display from her tablet. "In Krillian society, younglings stay in constant physical contact with their parent until they're about 7 years old by our calendar. It's not optional. It's biological. Without it, they experience severe anxiety." "He won't let me near him except when he's scared," Hannah said. "Because you're giving him the choice. Krillian parents don't. They maintain contact whether the youngling wants it or not. It's how they regulate their emotions." Haijin studied her display. "Where does he sleep?" "In my quarters. I set up a bed for him in the corner." "And where do you sleep?" "In my bedroom." "The other room?" Haijin nodded. "That's the problem. He can't see you. His instincts tell him you might disappear like his father did. He's living in constant fear." That night, Hana did something that made the security team very nervous. She moved her sleeping mat into the main room where Jinho's bed was. The youngling watched her with wide eyes as she settled down just 3 meters away from him. "Good night, Jinho," she said softly, then closed her eyes. She didn't fall asleep immediately. She listened to Jinho moving around in the darkness. Eventually, she felt him settle near her mat. Not touching, but close. Close enough that she could hear his breathing sync with hers. For the first time in 3 weeks, neither of them made distress sounds in the night. The improvement was gradual but real. When Haijin visited the next day, she found Jinho sitting calmly while Hannah worked on her reports. His ridges were down and his scales were a healthy blue. "Much better," Haijin said. "Now we need to address his other needs." Krillian younglings learn to hunt with their parents. It's not just about food, it's about bonding. "Hunt? On a space station?" Hannah looked skeptical. "The training room has holographic programs. Let me set something up." An hour later, Hannah stood in the training room watching Haijin program a simulation. Jinho sat at her feet, his tail wrapped loosely around her ankle. It was the first time he had initiated physical contact while calm, the hologram activated. Suddenly, they were standing in a dense forest. The air smelled of vegetation and earth. In the distance, something moved between the trees. Jinho's entire body changed. His ridges came up, but this time it wasn't fear or aggression. It was focus. He made a low sound in his throat and looked up at Hannah. "I think he wants you to hunt with him," Haijin said from the control room. Hannah had no idea what to do. She wasn't a hunter. She was a doctor. But Jinho was looking at her with such expectation that she couldn't refuse. "Okay," she said. "Show me what to do." What happened next was clumsy and awkward. Hana stumbled through the forest while Jinho moved with natural grace. The holographic prey animal, something that looked like a six-legged deer, bolted when Hana stepped on a branch. They lost it 3 times. Hana fell twice. At one point, she was pretty sure she was chasing Jinho instead of the prey, but when they finally cornered the animal and Jinho's teeth closed on its holographic throat, something magical happened. The youngling immediately dragged the kill to Hana's feet. He looked up at her and made a proud, chirping sound. "That's a presentation," Hajen's voice was excited. Krillian younglings only present their kills to their parents. "Hana, he just declared you his mother." Hana looked down at Jinho. The youngling was vibrating with joy, his tail swishing back and forth. She knelt down slowly and placed her hand on his head. His scales were warm under her palm. "Good job. I'm proud of you." Jinho pressed his head into her hand and made a rumbling sound that Heijin later told her was the Krillian version of purring, but their happiness was short-lived. 2 days later, Commander Minho delivered the news. The Krillian delegation arrives in 1 week. They're bringing warships. 3 of them. Minho looked grim, and they're being led by Vector's clutch brother, a general named Thrax. "What does that mean?" Hana asked. "It means the man coming has legal claim to Jinho under Krillian law. And from what our intelligence tells us, General Thrax believes humans are weak and unworthy of respect." Minho paused. "He's also known for his temper. If he decides we've insulted his family by keeping Jinho, he has the authority to declare war." Hana looked at Jinho, who was playing with a puzzle toy Haijin had brought. He looked happy now, content, for the first time since his father died. He looked like a child instead of a traumatized survivor. "They can't take him," Hana said quietly. "I don't think we'll have a choice." The 3 Krillian warships appeared on Dawn Station's sensors like nightmares made real. Each ship was a masterpiece of predatory design, all sharp angles and weapon arrays. They moved through space with the confidence of creatures that had never known fear. Hana stood in the station's observation deck, Jinho pressed close to her side. The youngling had been anxious all morning. His ridges kept rising and falling, and he refused to leave her sight even for a moment. Somehow, he knew something bad was coming. "They're hailing us," Commander Minho said. His voice was steady, but Hana could see the tension in his shoulders. Opening channel. The holographic display activated, and Hana got her first look at General Thrax. He was massive, even for a Krillian. His scales were deep red, almost black, marked with white scars that spoke of countless battles. 3 of his 4 arms bore military rank insignia. The 4th arm ended in a bladed weapon that had been permanently grafted to replace his missing hand. His eyes glowed like hot coals. "I am General Thrax of the Krillian Imperial Fleet," the image said. His voice was like grinding stone. "I come to reclaim what was stolen from my bloodline." Minho stepped forward. "General, Dawn Station welcomes you. We have not stolen anything. We are caring for your brother's son as he requested with his dying breath." Thrax's lip curled, showing teeth designed for tearing meat. "A human caring for a Krillian warrior's son. This is an insult to my brother's memory. Jinho belongs with his own kind." "But perhaps we should discuss this in person," Minho suggested. "We can arrange a formal meeting." "Yes, we will meet. And we will settle this matter." The channel closed abruptly. Haijin, who had been observing silently, spoke up. "That went better than expected." "He could have just demanded we hand over Jinho immediately." "He wants something," Security Chief Taijin said. "Krillians don't negotiate unless they see an advantage." 6 hours later, General Thrax and 2 of his warriors entered the station's diplomatic hall. Hana had wanted to keep Jinho in her quarters, but Minho insisted they bring him. "Thrax needs to see him." "To understand the situation?" It was a mistake. The moment Jinho saw his uncle, something primal took over. The youngling let out a high-pitched distress call and scrambled behind Hana, his claws digging into her uniform. His neck ridges shot up higher than Hana had ever seen them, forming a crown of spikes around his head. Thrax stopped walking. His warriors reached for their weapons but didn't draw them. The general's eyes fixed on Jinho, and something dangerous flickered in their depths. Come here, nephew, Thrax said in his own language. Jinho's translator device rendered it in standard for the humans. Jinho pressed closer to Hana. A low, threatening hiss escaped his throat. Thrax's scales darkened with anger. This is what you have done to my brother's son. You have made him a coward. A shame to his bloodline. He's not a coward, Hana said. Her voice was quiet but firm. He's a scared child who watched his father die. And whose fault is that? Thrax moved closer and his warriors followed. If your kind had proper medical facilities, Vector would still live. Instead, he died on this inferior station, and you corrupted his son with your weak human sentiment. The formal hearing that followed was brutal. It took place in the station's largest conference room with representatives from both human and Krillian governments participating via holographic link. Minho presented the case for keeping Jinho on Dawn Station. He showed medical records of Jinho's improvement, psychological evaluations from Haijin, and testimony from staff who had witnessed the youngling's transformation. Thrax dismissed it all. He presents. His kill's like a obedient pet, the general said with contempt. He clings to his human keeper like a weak hatchling. In Krillian society, a warrior's son is taken at his age and placed with the war trainers. He would learn strength, discipline, honor. He's 4 years old, Hana said, unable to stay quiet. He should be learning to play, not fight. This is why humans will never understand us. Thrax stood, his full height making even the tall ceiling feel small. You see childhood as a time of weakness to be protected? We see it as the foundation for future strength. Every moment Jinho spends with you, he becomes less Krillian, less worthy of his father's name. Vector chose this, Hana said. His last words were asking me to protect Jinho, to teach him that humans are friends. My brother was dying and delirious with pain. He did not understand what he was asking. Thrax's voice softened slightly. Vector was a good warrior, but too influenced by your kind. That friendship cost him his life? Haijin spoke up from her position at the table. General, with respect, Jinho is thriving under Dr. Hana's care. His physical health is excellent. His psychological markers show normal development for his age. He's learning both standard and Krillian languages. He's weak, Thrax interrupted. I watched your security footage. I saw him hide from me like prey hiding from a predator. That is not normal Krillian behavior. That is learned cowardice. That's trauma response, Haijin argued. He associates adult Krillian males with his father's death. It's actually a sign of intelligence that he... Thrax slammed his fist on the table, and the reinforced material cracked. Enough, I invoke the trial of kinship. The room went silent. Even the holographic representatives seemed shocked. Commander Minho found his voice first. General, that's an ancient law. It hasn't been used in centuries. It is still valid under Krillian legal code. Thrax fixed his burning gaze on Hana. If this human truly has formed a parental bond with Jinho, she must prove she can provide what a Krillian parent would provide. Protection, teaching, survival skills. How? Hana asked, though part of her already knew the answer. You will take Jinho to a designated survival zone. You will remain there for 3 days. You will hunt, gather, defend against predators, and keep my nephew alive. Thrax bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. If you succeed, humanity gains the right to foster Krillian younglings who choose your kind. If you fail, Jinho returns to Krillian custody, and this experiment ends. And if she dies? Taijin asked bluntly. Then she was never worthy of the title parent. Thrax looked at Hana. What say you, human? Will you prove your claim, or will you surrender Jinho now and admit you are too weak for this task? Hana looked at Jinho. The youngling had calmed slightly during the hearing, but his eyes were fixed on his uncle with clear distrust. When he felt her gaze, he looked up at her. Despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty, there was trust in those large eyes. She thought about the past 3 weeks, the destroyed quarters, the sleepless nights, the slow, painful progress. She thought about the first time Jinho had presented a kill to her, the first time he had willingly touched her, the way he purred when she praised him. I accept, Hana said. Mine started to protest, but she held up her hand. He's my responsibility. Vector asked me to protect him. I gave my word. You are either very brave or very foolish, Thrax said. We will transport you to a Krillian training world. It is where our younglings go to prove themselves before joining the warrior class. You will have access to basic survival equipment. Nothing more. When? Hana asked. Tomorrow. That gives you time to say your goodbyes. After the meeting ended, Hyjin pulled Hana aside. You don't have to do this. We can fight this legally. Appeal to the Galactic Council. That will take months. Years, maybe? And Jinho will spend all that time wondering if he's going to be taken away. Hana shook her head. No, this ends now. One way or another. That night, Hana couldn't sleep. She lay on her mat in the quarters she shared with Jinho, listening to his breathing. The youngling was curled up close to her, closer than usual. His tail was wrapped around her wrist. Even in sleep, he refused to let her go. I hope I know what I'm doing, she whispered to the darkness. From the doorway, Taijin's voice answered. Minho asked me to prep you. We have until dawn. Get up. We have work to do. The security chief spent the night teaching Hana everything he could. How to start a fire without modern tools. How to find water. How to build a shelter. How to move quietly through hostile terrain. How to defend herself. I'm not a fighter, Hana said after her 10th failed attempt to properly swing the practice staff. No, Taijin agreed. But you're smart and you're stubborn. Use those. Don't try to be Krillian. Be human. That's what Jinho needs anyway. As dawn approached, Hana returned to find Jinho awake and waiting. The youngling knew something was happening. His ridges were partially raised, and he watched her with worried eyes. Hana knelt down and pulled him into a hug. We're going on a trip? Just you and me. It's going to be hard, but we'll be together. Can you be brave? Jinho chirped softly and pressed his head against her chest. His small claws gripped her uniform tightly. I'll take that as a yes, Hana said, trying to smile. Outside, the Krillian transport ship waited. The heat hit Hana like a physical blow the moment the transport doors opened. The air was thick and humid, pressing down on her lungs with every breath. Gravity pulled at her body with extra weight that made her knees want to buckle. This is the proving grounds, General Thrax's voice came through the transport speakers. Young Krillian warriors train here before their first combat assignment. You have 3 days. Survive them. Hana stepped onto the ramp, holding Jinho close. The youngling's claws dug into her shoulder, but she barely felt it. She was too focused on the environment before her. Dense jungle stretched in every direction. The trees were massive, their trunks wider than the transport ship. Vines hung between them like natural bridges. The canopy above was so thick that only scattered beams of light reached the forest floor. And everywhere she could hear sounds. Chirps, calls, roars, and things she had no name for. Your equipment pack is at your feet, Thrax continued. It contains a knife, a fire starter, water purification tablets, and a basic medical kit. The planet is filled with predators from various Krillian colony worlds. All of them are hungry. All of them are deadly. The transport doors began to close. Hana grabbed the pack and jumped clear just before they sealed completely. The ship lifted off, leaving them alone. For a long moment, Hana just stood there, trying to adjust. The gravity was crushing. Every movement took more effort than it should. Sweat already dripped down her face despite standing still. Jinho squirmed in her arms and made a questioning sound. We're okay, Hana said, trying to convince herself as much as him. First thing, we need shelter. Somewhere safe to sleep tonight. She knew from Taijin's crash course that shelter was the priority. Water second, food third. She scanned the area, looking for something defensible. A cluster of rocks caught her eye about 50 meters away. It wasn't perfect, but it offered some protection from 3 sides. The walk took 15 minutes and left her gasping. By the time they reached the rocks, her legs were shaking. This gravity was going to be a serious problem. Jinho, however, seemed energized. He jumped from her arms and began exploring the area with natural curiosity. His movements were quick and effortless. The heavy gravity that crushed Hana meant nothing to him. "Lucky you," Hana muttered, watching him dart between rocks. She spent the next hour building a basic shelter. Using the knife, she cut branches and vines, weaving them together to form a lean-to against the largest rock. It was crude work, and her hands were covered in cuts by the time she finished. But it would keep rain off them if it came dot by then. The sun was setting. The jungle transformed as darkness fell. The sounds grew louder and stranger. Things moved in the shadows between trees. Hana started a small fire using the fire starter, grateful for Taijin's lessons. The flames pushed back the darkness maybe 3 meters. Beyond that, anything could be watching. Jinho sat close to the fire, his head tilted as he listened to the jungle. His neck ridges were up, but not in fear, in focus. He was reading the environment in ways Hana couldn't. "What do you hear?" Hana asked softly. Jinho chirped and pointed toward the darkness. Then he made a low rumbling sound in his throat. "Predator?" Hana guessed. The youngling nodded. Haijin had taught him that gesture during their time together. Hana's hand tightened on the knife. It suddenly felt very small and inadequate. But the night passed without incident. Whatever Jinho had heard stayed in the darkness. The next morning brought new challenges. Hana woke stiff and sore. Her body screamed from the combination of heavy gravity and sleeping on hard ground. But she forced herself up. Water was critical now. Jinho led her through the jungle with surprising confidence. His senses picked up a stream that Hana would have walked past 3 times. The water was cool and clear, and after treating it with purification tablets, Hana drank deeply. "Now food," she said. Her stomach was already growling. She tried to remember what Taijin had taught her about jungle survival. Look for fruit, insects if necessary, fish from streams. But everything here was alien. She had no idea what was safe to eat. Jinho, however, had no such problems. He disappeared into the underbrush and returned minutes later carrying something that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a lizard. It was already dead, killed with a precise bite to the neck. He dropped it at Hana's feet and looked up at her expectantly. "Good hunting," Hana said, managing a smile despite her exhaustion. "Can humans eat this?" She had no idea, but her options were limited. She cleaned and cooked the creature over their fire. The meat was tough and gamey, but it was protein. She ate half and gave the rest to Jinho, who devoured it happily. They fell into a rhythm over the next day. Jinho hunted small creatures. Hana gathered what plants looked edible and kept their fire burning. She built a better shelter, reinforcing it with more branches. She explored the area, mapping safe routes and potential dangers in her mind, but the gravity was wearing her down. Every movement was a struggle. By the second evening, her legs were cramping constantly. She could barely stand without her muscles screaming in protest, Jinho noticed. He stayed closer than usual, his eyes worried. When Hana sat down hard, gasping for breath, the youngling pressed against her side and made concerned sounds. "I'm okay," Hana lied. "You're just tired." The truth was she didn't know if she could last another day. Human bodies weren't designed for this. Every hour in this gravity damaged her muscles more. Soon she wouldn't be able to move at all. That's when the Razorwing attacked. It came from above, dropping from the canopy in complete silence. Hana only knew it was there when Jinho screamed a warning. She looked up to see something nightmarish diving toward her. The creature had a wingspan of 3 meters. Its wings were thin as paper but sharp as swords, lined with serrated edges. Its body was lean muscle and predatory intent. And it was fast. Hana threw herself sideways, purely on instinct. The Razorwing's talons missed her head by centimeters. It pulled up, circling for another attack. Jinho positioned himself between Hana and the predator, his ridges fully extended. But he was just a youngling. Against something this size, he would be killed. Hana's mind raced. She couldn't outrun it. Couldn't outfight it. The Razorwing was faster, stronger, and built to kill. But as it circled for another dive, she noticed something. Its wings were massive. It needed space to maneuver. "Jinho, follow me." Hannah grabbed the youngling and ran for the densest part of the jungle. Every step was agony. Her muscles screamed. Her lungs burned. The gravity tried to drag her down. But fear gave her strength she didn't know she had. The razoring dove again. Hannah ducked under a low-hanging branch at the last second. She heard the creature's wings slice through leaves and wood, but it couldn't follow through the dense foliage. Its wings were too large. Hannah kept running, weaving between trees, ducking under branches, moving through spaces too small for the predator to follow. Behind her, she could hear it calling in frustration. It crashed through the canopy, trying to find an opening. Finally, Hannah found what she was looking for. A section of jungle where the trees grew so close together that their trunks formed a natural wall. The gaps between them were barely wide enough for a person. She pushed through, Jinho in her arms. Once on the other side, she grabbed her fire starter and a handful of dry leaves from her pack. Her hands shook as she worked, but she managed to create a small flame. She held it up to the branches and vines blocking the narrow passage. The fire caught quickly in the dry material. Flames spread, creating a wall of heat and light. The razorwing appeared at the gap, its eyes fixed on them. It tested the opening but couldn't fit through. The fire drove it back when it tried to force its way. After several attempts, it gave up, letting out a frustrated shriek before flying away. Hannah collapsed, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Jinho climbed onto her chest, checking her for injuries. His little hands touched her face gently. "We're okay," Hannah gasped. "We made it." But they weren't safe yet. The fire had driven off the razorwing, but it also announced their position to every predator in the area. They needed to move. Hannah forced herself to stand. Her legs barely held her weight. She picked up Jinho and started walking. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew they needed distance from the fire. She walked for what felt like hours. The jungle darkened as night approached. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every sound made her jump. But she kept moving. Finally, she couldn't go any further. She found a fallen tree with a hollow beneath it and crawled inside with Jinho. There was barely enough room for both of them. But it was hidden and defensible. Jinho curled up against her, exhausted from fear and excitement. Hannah held him close, her body shaking from strain. "One more day," she whispered. "We just need to survive one more day." Jinho chirped softly and tightened his grip on her uniform. In the darkness, Hannah closed her eyes and prayed they would both see tomorrow's sunrise. The third day dawned with heavy rain. Water poured through the jungle canopy, turning the forest floor into mud. Hannah crawled out of their hiding spot, every muscle in her body screaming. She could barely move. 2 days of fighting the crushing gravity had pushed her body past its limits. Jinho was in better shape, but even he seemed tired. They huddled together under a large leaf, sharing body heat while rain hammered down around them. "Just a few more hours," Hannah said. "The transport comes back at sunset. We just need to survive until then." But the jungle had one more test waiting. The creature that found them was something Hannah had no name for. It was the size of a small transport vehicle, covered in armored scales that looked like black metal. 6 legs carried its massive body with surprising speed. Its head was all teeth and hunger. Jinho saw it first. His warning chirp was high-pitched with terror. This was a Vrax, one of the deadliest predators in Krillian space. Even adult warriors feared them. Hannah tried to run, but her legs gave out after 3 steps. She crashed into the mud, pain shooting through her cramped muscles. The Vrax charged toward them, each footfall shaking the ground. "Jinho, hide!" Hannah screamed, but the youngling didn't run. He positioned himself between Hannah and the predator, his small body trembling but determined. His neck ridges were fully extended, making him look slightly larger. He hissed at the Vrax, a sound that would have been threatening from an adult Krillian but was almost pitiful from a child. The Vrax paused, its massive head tilting as it studied this tiny creature that dared challenge it. Then it opened its mouth and roared. The sound was so loud that Hannah felt it in her chest. Her mind raced. She couldn't fight this thing. Couldn't outrun it. Her body was broken, useless. But she was still human. Humans had survived on Earth not because they were the strongest or fastest. They survived because they were clever. She looked around desperately. The rain, the mud, the trees. What could she use? Then she saw it. A vine hanging from a nearby tree. It was positioned above a section of ground that looked different from the surrounding area, softer, wetter. "Jinho," Hannah called. "Come here now." The youngling hesitated, then darted back to her. The Vrax charged after him. Its massive bodybuilding momentum. Hannah grabbed Jinho and rolled sideways with the last of her strength. The Vrax couldn't stop in time. Its 6 legs hit the soft ground, and suddenly it was sinking. The mud beneath that spot was deep, probably fed by an underground spring. The Vrax thrashed, trying to pull itself free, but its weight worked against it, but it wasn't enough. The Vrax was strong. It would pull itself free in minutes. Hannah's hand found a rock. She threw it weakly, hitting the creature's head. It did no damage, but it got the Vrax's attention. The predator focused its eyes on her, its fury absolute. "Jinho," Hannah said quietly. "Remember when we hunt together? The holographic deer?" The youngling chirped questioningly. "I need you to hunt like your father taught you. Can you do that?" Hannah pointed at the Vrax's neck, where the armor plates didn't quite meet. "There, that's the weak spot." Jinho looked at the Vrax, then at Hannah. His eyes were wide with fear. But there was something else there too. Trust. He trusted her. The youngling took off, circling around the struggling Vrax. The predator was so focused on Hannah that it didn't notice the small figure approaching from behind. Jinho climbed a nearby tree with natural agility, positioning himself above the Vrax. Hannah kept the Vrax's attention by throwing more rocks, calling out, doing anything to keep those deadly eyes on her. Her body was failing. She could feel consciousness slipping away. But she held on. Jinho jumped. The youngling landed on the Vrax's back, his claws finding purchase in the gaps between armor plates. The predator roared and thrashed, trying to shake him off. But Jinho held on with the determination of someone protecting family. His teeth found the gap in the armor at the Vrax's neck. Krillian younglings were venomous. It was their only defense against larger predators. Jinho bit down with all his strength. The Vrax's roar turned into something else. Something pained. The venom that had barely affected Hannah worked fast on the Vrax. Its thrashing became uncoordinated. Its 6 legs stopped working together. Within 30 seconds, the massive predator collapsed into the mud. Still alive but paralyzed, Jinho jumped clear and ran to Hannah. She caught him in her arms, holding him tight. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved us." The youngling was shaking, but he made a proud, chirping sound. He had hunted like his father. He had protected his parent. Hannah's vision was darkening. She had nothing left. But they had survived. 3 days in the proving grounds. Together, she woke in the medical bay of Dawn Station. Commander Minho stood at her bedside, along with Haijin and Security Chief Taijin. And sitting in a chair nearby, looking uncomfortable in the human-sized furniture, was General Thrax. "Jinho?" Hannah tried to sit up, but her body refused to cooperate. "He's fine," Haijin said quickly. "He's sleeping in the next room. He refused to leave your side until we sedated him." Thrax stood and approached the bed. His expression was unreadable. "We watched everything through the observation drones. Every moment of your 3 days." Hannah waited for judgment. For him to say she had failed, that she had put Jinho in too much danger, that humans were too weak to raise Krillian children. Instead, Thrax did something unexpected. He lowered his head, exposing his throat. It was a Krillian gesture of deep respect, one predator acknowledging another's strength. "You do not fight like a Krillian," Thrax said slowly. "You do not hunt like a Krillian. You do not even move like a Krillian." He raised his head and his eyes held something new, respect. "But you survived what would kill many of my warriors. And you taught my nephew something I could never teach him." "What's that?" Hannah asked. "That strength comes in many forms. That the weakest body can carry the strongest spirit. That family is not about blood or species, but about who stands beside you when the predators come." Thrax placed one massive hand on the bed. My brother chose well when he gave Jinho to you. Does this mean... Hannah couldn't finish the sentence. It means humanity has earned something unprecedented. The right to foster Krillian younglings who choose your kind. Thrax looked at Minho. I propose an exchange program. Our younglings who do not fit traditional warrior paths can learn from your people. Your children can learn from our culture in return. Minho looked stunned. General, this would change everything. The political implications alone are significant, yes. But I watched a human female with a damaged hand and a failing body protect my nephew for 3 days. I watched her use cunning instead of strength, patience instead of aggression. I watched her teach him to hunt not as a lone predator but as part of a pack. Thrax's voice grew firm. Krillian culture prizes strength above all. But we have forgotten that intelligence is also strength. Adaptability is also strength. Your species remembers this. Perhaps it is time my people learned from yours. The door opened and Jinho rushed in. He must have woken when the sedative wore off. He jumped onto Hannah's bed, careful of her injuries, and pressed his head against her shoulder. His purring sound filled the room. You bite like your father, Hannah said softly, remembering that first day. But you're learning to love like humans do. Jinho looked up at her and in perfect standard said, I love you, mother. The room went silent. It was the first time anyone had heard Jinho speak standard. Haijin's eyes widened. Minho looked like he might cry. Even Thrax's stern expression softened. I love you too, son, Hannah said, pulling him close. 1 year passed. Dawn Station had been transformed. An entire section was now dedicated to what everyone called the family center. Human families had volunteered to foster Krillian younglings. Krillian mentors arrived to teach human children their culture and skills. It was chaotic, often difficult, and sometimes resulted in destroyed furniture and misunderstandings, but it worked. Hannah oversaw the program with Haijin's help. They had 15 Krillian younglings in human care now, and 20 human children learning from Krillian teachers. The cultural exchange was changing both species in ways no one had predicted. Jinho had grown significantly. He was almost as tall as Hannah's waist now, and his scales had developed the deeper blue of a juvenile. His neck ridges had permanent patterns that Haijin said indicated a calm, thoughtful personality. Rare among Krillians, he spoke 3 languages fluently now: Standard, Krillian, and Korean, which Hannah had taught him. He read human books and Krillian history texts. He hunted in simulations but also played puzzle games and painted pictures. He was becoming something new. Not fully Krillian, not fully human, but beautifully both. General Thrax had become an unexpected ally. His warship stayed near Dawn Station, and he visited monthly to check on the program. He had even started learning Standard. Though he claimed it was only for practical reasons, today representatives from 3 more species were arriving. They wanted to study the program, possibly join it. The idea of predator and prey species cooperating had sparked something across the galaxy. Hope that old enemies could become new families. Hannah stood on the observation deck, Jinho at her side. She looked at the scar on her hand, the permanent mark from that first terrified bite. She had refused to have it fully removed. It was a reminder of where they had started,